Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me. And thanks especially for including amongst all these august researchers a practitioner, which is what I am. I am not, although my official title is environmental scientist, I really think of myself as a practitioner of land management. And so with that, we'll get started. So there's been a lot of talk so far about immaturity risk with obligate seeding Manzanitas. And there's been some discussion of, come on, what's the other end? Thank you, senescence. I didn't want to say senility because it's a senescence risk. But in the Santa Cruz Mountains, one of the things we see, which is somewhat different, is succession risk. And so what we have here is a picture that is repeated many, many times over in our state parks, which is evidence of, you see those oaks leaning out over the dead Manzanitas and shading those out. And we have lost a significant extent of the chaparral that we've had in the last 100 years. Admittedly, I like the postage stamp, the stamp collector thing. I'm not a stamp collector. I'm managing forward, and things change. These systems are dynamic. But some of these chaparral types, this is a map of the Santa Cruz Sandhills, which are inland marine deposits that were deposited about 15 million years ago and support a couple of rare vegetation types, one sand parkland and the other sand chaparral, which is dominated by Arctostaphylos sylvicola, which is an obligate cedar, and whose extent has really shrunk over the last 100 years. There's a few things going on here, and I actually have a pointer. One, you can kind of see those light patches. These are sand quarries, so that doesn't help. It's really hard to be a Manzanita in there. Although most of those actually happened in the sand parkland, so there's even less sand parkland than there is sand chaparral. But then, in addition to that, you have this succession that is going on, and these chaparral patches are shrinking and are being replaced by mixed evergreen forest for the most part. And so we were seeing this happen at Henry Cowell State Park. And and it's not just about plants, right? So there's a bunch of endemic animals that occur here. We have the Mount Herman June beetle. We've got the Santa Cruz kangaroo rat. We've actually already seen local extirpations of the kangaroo rat and of coast horned lizards, western whiptails. There used to be roadrunners in Santa Cruz County, and those also, with the elimination of disturbance and fire, those open habitats that they preferred have gone away, and so have the animals. I think the vegetation communities, the chaparral itself, is significantly more resilient than some of the faunal associates. And so that even though these seeds can sit in the ground for a couple hundred years, these animals cannot persist now that we've fragmented things to the degree that we have, so that in the past they would be able to recolonize from other older stands. Now those stands don't exist. And so managing these small fragmented stands becomes increasingly important. We also have, a suite of rare annuals that are fire followers. This is Penstemon, Britanniae, and the subspecies Decoratus, which is just found in Santa Cruz County. And so we were looking at this, old growth chaparral. At one point, somebody kind of went cowboy on us and cut down one of this chaparral type also, it's a little peculiar because in this vegetation type, we have coastal ponderosa pine, so Pinus benthamiana. And we had someone cut one of those down. And it turns out that it was somewhere between 120 and 130 years old. So I think that we've had some recent fires in this vegetation-type wildfires, and it has resulted in the death of all of those ponderosas. So it's fair to assume that that pine is a pretty good marker for the age of the stand that we were looking at. And you can see there's a fair amount of dead material in the chaparral. And so we thought we would see what we could do to introduce fire back into this system. And the first thing we tried was pile burning. It's easy, you know, you go ahead, well, it's not easy if you're those people, but it's the simplest thing to do and the easiest thing to pull off. And so we went ahead and we made these piles and we burned them in the fall. And what we ended up with, predictably, was, you know, these holes in this carpet of duff, right? Because what happens after 120 years with no fire is that you end up with this increasing O horizon, this organic layer that acts as a blanket that restricts germination of a lot of these rare species that we're looking at. So after we did that, I had the bright idea, well, maybe what we'll do is then we'll burn these things in the fall, and then we'll come back in the middle of summer, and we'll be able to just burn all that duff off when it's super dry and it's super, it'll be super safe because we're just burning duff. But it turns out once you walk all over that duff, you've crunched it down, you've ruined the fuel bed, you almost can't burn it, even under red flag conditions. So what we did, since we're recognizing now that it's that O horizon that we're really concerned about doing a reset on, is laid these fuels down in blocks, and with the idea that the heat from that material would consume the duff. And this, I don't know if you noticed in the slide where I was showing the Sandhills, but this is in close proximity to a lot of people's houses. So, and it's, you know, challenging to burn in chaparral anywhere, and certainly if you have infrastructure, it becomes challenging. So what we wanted to do was go ahead and burn in the spring when, once we modified the fuels, they would be dry. Meanwhile, the surrounding vegetation would be, have high fuel moistures, and it would be safe to burn. And we instituted that, and we did some monitoring, and although it was out of season and there was some concern about burning in the spring and what effect would you have with this moisture, and would you steam sterilize some of these, you know, fire followers, et cetera, we actually got really good results. And we liked what we saw, so that was in 2008 and continued in 2009. And then we decided to increase pace and scale and started larger plots. We're still doing those blocks, you can see them there, but then the red outline is where once we burned those blocks, we were able to make our plots a little bigger. We're still only talking 3.5 acres. It's pretty small stuff. This is the plot after it was prepped. This was all done by hand, CCC crews. There are folks here who helped oversee those crews. And so that's what it looked like during the burn. You definitely increase, I think you're going to increase residence time, and I was a little worried we're putting too much heat into this system and that you might have negative impacts on recruitment, but that is not what we saw. So this is looking out over all of that material. Oh yes, and then to increase pace and scale even further, doing that by hand is really expensive. So what we did is we introduced our Pleistocene megafauna analog and had it run over some of this stuff and then burned. One of the things that we did get immediately after these burns is this, you see all that fluffy tan stuff there? That's Senectio sylvestris, and it just blew up. It's an exotic and it's wind dispersed, and it would come in that first year and take advantage of that nitrogen pulse, and then the next year we just go away. So these are some of our plots burned in, and these photographs were taken a couple years ago. So that's, oh, there we are. And then we get, come on, you can do it. There's one of our 2015. and there's 2008. So what we're seeing here is basically we're getting back to where we were. So we're getting a lot of recruitment. It is the composition of these stands is very similar to what it was prior to us doing this work. And now we have eliminated that O horizon, and I feel like we've reset the clock so that this vegetation type is no longer in danger, at least in the next 50 years, from being overtopped by oaks. It does have the hazard of being burned again, but given that it's in a very populated area and right by a CAL FIRE station, I think we're in pretty good shape as far as that goes. Thanks.